My lecture is on treatment of dryland valleys with water spreading weirs in the Sahel region, and more particularly in Chad, Niger and Burkina Faso. In those countries, the German Development Cooperation has been supporting this kind of flood regulating structures for many years now. In fact, it started somewhere in the middle of the 90s of the former century and has been continuing until today. The purpose of what is called water spreading weirs is actually morefold, so to speak. In fact, it reduces to a large extent erosion in eroded areas, so in valleys that have been degraded already due to erosion and also due to severe floods from surrounding areas, from the catchment areas, in which overutilization of land has been a problem, especially after the droughts of the 70s and the 80s of last century. Now, erosion protection is one purpose, but the other one is that as soon as a weir has been built, the flood velocity is reduced and the impact of floods as well. At the same time, the flood water trickles rather than goes at high speed, trickles over a large width of the weirs, trickles down from upstream to downstream and has time to infiltrate the soil and thereby creating better possibilities for agricultural production. So this is the second purpose, and at the same time, that's because of regulation of water, the environment is also improved. In fact, this is obvious when you look at pictures of such areas. The environment is greening in a matter of a few years. And another advantage of higher infiltration, better infiltration of water is that in the dry season, groundwater that has been enriched, recharged by the slower flowing water, that the groundwater can be used for the production of vegetables from shallow wells, because groundwater level increases also within a few years from when it was, for instance, before the weir was constructed 10 meters deep to only 2 or 3 meters deep. So throughout the dry season, wells can be dug up to a maximum of 6 or 7 meters. This distance between 2 and 7 is sufficient for farmers to produce one crop, as I said, usually vegetables that can be marketed and can contribute thus to the revenue of the farming family. I will now go through the slides of the PowerPoint presentation that I have prepared and just highlight not all the issues that have been mentioned, I highlight just most important ones, which are all based on the experience throughout a period of some 15 to 20 years now. I should also say that the development of the Weirs was already done before the German cooperation came in by Swiss Development Cooperation, especially in Chad. Another problem in Sahel countries is certainly also the population growth of about 3% at the moment, and with that it's among the highest in the world. As a consequence, many people have to migrate for shorter or longer periods to neighboring countries in the dry season, for example, just to earn some cash for their families. This is for many people a problem that can be mitigated also by better possibilities, better opportunities for agricultural production at home. In fact, water spreading Weirs concept, the implementation, planning, execution of works is today more and more integrated in rural development programs. It means that not only a beneficiary group is involved together with a financing institution, but the development of this kind of project has to be based on programs, for instance, development programs for communities or municipalities. So communities are involved, municipalities are involved, regional administration must be involved, as well as also the national level of government. This is important because projects cannot live on their own. They need, in one way or another, also the support, be it financial or also morally, from those who are responsible for development, not only of the area, but of the country. Because also after the building of Weirs and after farmers have started to produce, they always will need some kind of support. As far as technical matters is concerned, but especially also as far as agricultural development is concerned. This is something that has been introduced in recent years, for instance, through projects that are directed to decentralization and to handing over more and more responsibilities to municipalities, rather than just a top-down approach, so to speak, by which it's only the government or the regional, the national or regional government that takes decisions. Also important is the horizontal exchange of information. By this is meant that the knowledge of how to develop this kind of project does not remain with a small group of, say, consultants who come and go, but that information is transferred to those people, local consultants, local construction firms, contractors, and who are enabled in this way to continue to further extend the practices, the good practices that have been developed in the course of time. Some of the slides present actually what I have been talking about. First one, you see the relation between municipality, planning consultancy, farmer association, construction enterprise, village and farmers. And one thing is also mentioned in this respect, Land Right Commission, an important aspect, because this type of projects can only be implemented when land rights are clear-cut, at least at a certain higher level, let us put it that way. How farmers among themselves arrange things is another point, but until now most of the problems have been, for instance, between communities rather than between farmers individually. Let me just mention some of the facts of water spreading Weirs. I said already that they have been developed by the Swiss Development Corporation in Chad, and then after that also the German Development Corporation came in with KfW, the bank, the financing bank, and GIZ, the German technical assistance. The technique of water spreading is in itself not new, but it has been developed in the 90s in a way which is, let us say, a little more sophisticated, but not beyond what farmers can easily understand, what they can manage, and what they can work with. So it has appeared that with relatively low investments in this technique, farmers can improve their revenues and secure their livelihood. Of course, those farmers who have land in the valley areas. Some of the slides here show you how the water flows from one compartment above water spreading Weir to the next one. And on the aerial photograph you can clearly see the result of infiltrating water above and below the Weir. But interestingly, you can also see, or at least you can imagine, that the Weir, the wings of the Weir, more or less follow the contour lines, thereby reducing the height, but also having as a result that the water can easily be, that the water level in front of the Weir can be easily built up and then slowly trickle to the other side. Water spreading Weirs cannot or should not be seen as a standalone structure. In fact, the experience has shown that the best results can be obtained when a series of Weirs is built covering a valley from the top to the end. It is in this way that valleys can be restored, degraded valleys can be restored, and valleys with, at the moment already, good possibilities, good opportunities for land use can be improved. Especially water use is improved. In this slide that shows you the situation in 2003 before construction of the Weirs and in 2010 after construction of the Weirs, you can clearly see, well, both pictures were taken in the rainy season, you can clearly see the improved use of land on the picture of 2010. On this next slide, you can see how local labor is employed, and it is not too obvious, but what is also what also has become practice is that as much as possible local material is used, wherever possible and whenever possible. At the same time, people from the village, so local labor from the village, can be taught how to build, but also taught how to later on maintain the structure. And some of them can be trained as skilled laborers, masons, for instance. So the advantage of this type of Weirs, which are built in close cooperation and close participation with the population, is that the advantage is well beyond only improvement of agriculture and of erosion protection. I say only, but I mean this is already quite a bit, but it's not limited to that. Let me just give you briefly what the planning and implementation steps are. First of all, it's now common practice that municipalities make kind of development plan for their communities, for the villages, and similarly a management plan, a land use management plan should be established for the catchment area and the valley below by the villagers or by the users of the land themselves. In such a plan, already kind of selection of sites for Weirs is done. But not only that, it's also indicated what kind of improvements are necessary in the catchment area. Because it is obvious that rehabilitating the valley can not be done without also paying attention to improvement, to erosion protection in the catchment area. Again, this kind of planning is something that should be done in close cooperation, or rather by the beneficiaries with support, of course. But most of the input should come from the beneficiaries themselves. This is actually the first step. And then, as a next step, after the plan has been accepted, several administrative steps have been taken. The possibilities of rehabilitation should be studied in detail by specialized people from consulting firms. A feasibility study is done. Also, the environmental and social impacts are investigated, because change or improvement of land use always goes hand in hand with problems between future users or those who may experience negative impacts of the project. This could be, for instance, those people who use the land from time to time like herdsmen. This should, of course, be taken into account, and solutions should be studied beforehand. The next step, tender documents are established for construction, and contractors are invited to offer their services. Contractors should make use to a large extent of manual labor, which is available from the village and from the beneficiary community. Of course, care should be taken that the division of responsibilities is clear-cut between the contractor and the beneficiaries contributing to the work. After the construction, which usually for one wear can be done within one dry season, after construction, thus in the next rainy season, the use of the wear starts. And before that, already a management and maintenance committee has to be installed and also instructed what to do. An important aspect in this respect is that support to the beneficiary groups, to the users of the wear or the wares, it should be guaranteed that support to them is provided for at least a few seasons after construction. Because, first of all, they have to get acquainted with water management practices, although this is kept as easy as possible for them, some kind of water management is necessary. And at the same time, they have to adapt agricultural practices. This is an aspect which sometimes is somewhat neglected. But our experience is that it is a very important aspect that should not be underestimated. Just constructing a structure is not finally that difficult, although it is already difficult enough. But I mean, you have your experts for that, and they are usually well trained and are able to design structure in that way that they hold for many years. Still, maintenance is required, and water has to be used in an efficient way, and this takes time. That cannot be arranged from one day to the other, and not in just one season. And even after that, even after, say, a project has retired from the area, even then it should be somehow guaranteed that farmers can count on support, be it technical or as far as the agronomy is concerned. It's a problem, but it has to be addressed. As you will understand, it is important that from the side of donors, the commitment should not just be for a few years, should actually be for a long period. financial assistance, technical assistance should be guaranteed for many years. Not just for one project, but for, say, a whole area where such projects are realized. This is because in the course of time, techniques are improved, use of water is improved, and this should be followed up from one year to the other. Especially in this type of project, which is, as I said, not completely new, but for those farmers who are involved, it is new, and they should have, over a long period, possibility to improve their techniques. But at the same time, also, the technicians should be able to put improvements in practice and give follow-up for some years. Another point which is important is, of course, to take into account the roles of women and men as far as agriculture is concerned. Now, one of the experiences is also that the support should not be limited only to agriculture, to the agricultural use of the Weirs, but also to the consequences of that. For instance, when groundwater is used for the production of vegetables, in almost all cases that we have followed, production is such that a major part of it can be sold to the market. And this should also be taken into account already beforehand, so that farmers know where and how to sell the product. That they get information on prices, for instance, so that the advantage of, for instance, good prices does not remain only with the buyer, but that it also improves the revenue of the seller and the producer. As I said, once you are involved in a project like this one, or in development like this one, you also make mistakes. This can be poor selection of sites, maybe insufficient preparation, leading to conflicts between various factions of users. Conflicts thus should be resolved beforehand, which has not always been done. It has also been neglected in early years to look after transfer of knowledge and capacity building, and also neglect of customs, of existing land rights and existing land use by different users. So the impacts of the Weirs, I may resume rapidly, are restoration of eroded valleys, better improved infiltration of water into the soil, thereby raising groundwater levels and assuring better access to groundwater in the dry season. Soil fertility is enhanced, a very important aspect also, and even in years with low rainfall, but of course some rainfall, valley bottoms valleys may produce even when the yields may be on the low side, but at least some production is guaranteed. Now, just to give some figures that should not be taken too much as absolute figures, but just to give an indication, the increase of the cultivated area is about 2 to 4 times. This, of course, depends on the situation before the Weirs are built. Therefore, 2 to 4 times a large margin. Nevertheless, even 2 times is already quite a bit. The increase of yields is also important in the valley bottoms. So in the valley itself, in the lower part of the valley where land is used predominantly during the rainy season, the increase may have a factor of around 1.5, whereas the increase of vegetable production may be about the same or even more. Interesting figure is also the number of Weirs that has been built until early 2011. Total number is around 370 in the 3 countries, Chad, Niger and Burkina Faso. And the area that was improved, where conditions for agricultural production are now much better than before, around 15,000 hectares. So quite an important area. The costs of a Weir, as you can imagine, vary also very much. Depends on the length, depends on the costs of the spillway in the center of the valley, and it may go from 20,000 to 50,000 euros. The construction costs per hectare come down to somewhere between 600 and 1,500 euros. Even 1,500 is still, in many cases, acceptable. But, of course, kind of benefit cost study has to be done beforehand. These are, until now, the most important experiences from those projects that have been established with the support of German development cooperation until today.